So a big thank you to all of the speakers, but the speakers had requested that the questions be held to the end. So do we have any questions from the audience? We do have a microphone. And if you could just say where you're from as well.
Sure. My name is Emma Brink. I'm from Wiley. And David, during your presentation, you mentioned that publishers have an opportunity to really drive the solutions for helping researchers with compliance. But as we've seen throughout the presentation, a lot of researchers tend to lean on their institutions for help instead of publishers. And a lot of publishers are participating in these types of initiatives. But how do we really get researchers to know that we're doing that and use our services?
Well, I mean, I think the researchers just want it taken care of. They don't really care, who does this, and so it's a question of how we can position those services. And Judy talked about the work they're doing with Elsevier for their institutional repository. And is this, we sell a site license or a package of journals as a subscription to a university. The individual researcher never sees that transaction. They just know someone is taking care of this for me. I have access to the journal on campus. So to me, it seems, that's the same pathway you'd go through. These are services that are available to a university as part of your package. Potentially, you're buying, here's our set of journals. You can also buy the following services, maybe, text and data mining support or things like that. So I think, and I'll talk about it, and I think in the closing session, my talk is a little bit about this shift for publishers away from this idea where we perform services for the researcher right now. We give them to them for free, and in return, we get the rights to sell that content to the audience that wants to read it, and switching more to this idea of we are a service provider that sells services as this sort of direct exchange, and whether that's directly with the researcher, say, I'm paying an open access fee to publish this article, I'm paying you for the services you have done to make it published, or working with the universities of we are a research company that is providing, and some of the examples, Elsevier is a great example, and they're building all these really interesting workflow tools for universities that they're selling as well.
Can I comment as well? Just from the university point of view, I think when we look at the faculty who have been working for a number of years with NIH grants, they very much understand where that's automatically being handled in PubMed and that they don't have to do it. So I think there's an education component as this becomes rolled out, where we can say, if you've published in this, or this journal, not to worry, you're being taken care of. That, though, does require some changes on the part of the agencies, because several of the agencies are insisting that the deposit can only be made by the PI logging on with their PI identifier, not by a graduate assistant, not by the Office of Research, not by the library, not by the publisher. So we have some educating and communicating to do there. I think about simplifying the deposit requirements, making them more consistent across funding agencies, but also having more flexibility about what the source of the deposit is. In the end, it shouldn't really matter who makes the deposit as long as the right material is deposited in the right place. But I do think the faculty will very quickly understand if we say to them, here's a list of journal families that if you're publishing in these families, not to worry, and they'll be very grateful.
Hi, I'm Bill I'm Bill Silberg, and I'm with Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute, so we are a funder. I'd like to ask a very selfish question. What can publishers especially, and others, and by pressuring repositories do, to get funding information out in front of all the paywalls and all the back-end sorts of processes and tools that are really designed for heavy-duty compliance and to meet all of these regulations and requirements? But for a funder like us, and we are a little unusual, I get lots of pressure from folks who want to know why our funding is not readily available in all publicly accessible A&I services. So for example, funders are not listed in PubMed abstracts. Funders are not listed in journal abstracts. Publishers are not, that funding information is not in front of any paywall I'm aware of, any non-full text access. So from a purely selfish point of view, because we and I assume others would like folks to know that we paid for this stuff and we're publicly supported, so in effect the public is paying for this stuff, what can we help you do to really simply and easily put that information out in front of all the rest of this, which I understand is really important? Or am I missing that there are services that do that now, I just am not aware of them?
Well, I mean, there are a couple things that I think Howard can probably speak a little bit to Chorus's the open APIs and the Crossref funder information, which I believe is publicly available. So, I mean, we're seeing now the NIH is talking about including conflict of interest statements with abstracts. So that's sort of a move to take that type of information that is not sort of the substantive results that are written about in the paper and get that out in front. And I think, hopefully that shows a direction that maybe maybe the abstract that's displayed everywhere for free includes more chunks of information. We have, author affiliations. Why not also have funding affiliation? I think that's a great idea. In the short term, though, the information that's being collected, I mean, Chorus has, I think a huge percentage of the literature of papers that get published. The bigger publishers are all on board, and we are collecting the information through the Crossref funder database, which then is sent to Crossref. And Howard, can you talk about whether that's publicly available and whether someone could tap into like the Chorus API here and build a tool that does sort of display this information, at least so you guys could say, we've built this tool and on our site you can go see here all the papers that include our funding.
Yeah, so as I understand your question, Bill, the real question is on the landing page that the publishers present beyond the paywall, you would like to see PCORI or whatever, presented as having funded the research behind this paper, right?
Well, I mean, that's my selfish take. I'd like to see any funder, I've been complaining about this for 20 years.
Right.
I'd like to see, so it's a lot of good I'm doing. I just think that in this but it really has picked up steam in the last 5 years, as we all know. In the spirit of transparency, public accountability, it seems to me that who paid for it should be just as important as who wrote it.
Right. So a couple of comments there. So the publisher, by joining Chorus does not mandate how they present things on their page. However, most of the publishers that do contribute to Chorus are big believers in transparency of metadata. So there's two things. First off, the Chorus metadata itself is openly available, right? So you can get it. The second thing is some of the publishers actually, because of their interactions with the Chorus and interactions with institutions and interactions with funders, have seen that this is an important piece, and they actually have changed their landing pages to present this. So some of your desire is coming to be. And the third one, which is not a mandate of Chorus, but actually I noticed there are some Crossref people in the room, that the Crossmark system, which is outside of the paywall, some of the funders, some of the publishers are using that as a way to display where the funding sources are coming from. So I think this is an evolving thing. My opinion about how you get this done, right, is you speak up like you just did, right? And you also speak to this, especially start with some of the bigger publishers and just ask them why. And then they will slowly change their tune. And additionally, you have two of the Chorus people here in the room, the Chorus board member and the executive director. We can bring this back to our membership and pass it along, as well as you've got some folks from Crossref here too.
Yeah, no, and we have had conversations with you and others, and so we're totally supportive of all of this back-end work. I'm just thinking the kinds of calls I get are from people who may know what Chorus is, but are not going to go to the site. They're not going to look at Crossref. They want to see it when they click on the note that's in the New York Times.
Yeah, but to be clear, just so I talk about the Crossmark thing, which I'm not an expert on, but the Crossmark logo actually does appear on the landing pages, so it's a very simple click for people to see that data. So it's actually not buried in Crossref, it's not buried in Chorus, it's actually on the landing pages.
But it's up to the publisher to include funder information.
Yeah, I think that's the challenge. So, great, I will be hounding you for the next 5 years.
Yeah, no,
That's awesome.
We're collecting that information. I mean, we've got it, we're tagging the papers with the metadata. It seems, you could fairly trivially display, under author affiliations, for example, when you open up that, here's the funding that's listed with it. I mean, maybe, we could find journals from a couple different publishers that have a decent amount of PCORI published papers and
We could spotlight
try to
that.
just drive
Yeah.
a pilot. I know at OUP and I know at every other publisher, we're always open to sort of doing these little pilots and playing around of, how can we improve our interface? How can we improve what we
Yeah, that
display?
sounds like a
So-
great idea.
Yeah, so let's.
Good,
let's talk.
okay, we'll catch up. Thanks a
Bill.
lot.
Any other questions? No other questions? So I just had one by listening to the speakers. So I think it was Judy that you said that it's starting to fall upon either the library or the Office of Research to actually do this, implement it. Is that true, or is it that the PIs have totally just delegated that to you, or talk about it?
So the initial announcements that were made by the Vice President of Research at the academic deans meetings indicated that they would ultimately hold the PI responsible, which meant they would ultimately hold the department chair and the dean responsible. I think partly just because it's so massive and we're such a distributed university. And again, because some of these policies are requiring the PI to be the one to deposit,
Right.
and so you
Right.
have to rely on that. But I think there is very much a recognition that it can't stop there. So when the NIH compliance went from voluntary to mandatory, they looked at our level of compliance. And of course, compliance was great on the journals that were doing the direct deposit into PubMed, but it was not so great on the ones where that wasn't happening. And they turned it over to the Health Science Center Library, which reports through me, to actually track down and try to complete this compliance, and then, kind of an education process to remind people that they had to do this unless they were publishing in journals that were doing the deposit for them. So I think it's going to be a combined responsibility. I mean, obviously, in the end, what's going to happen is that the Vice President of Research's office, in some fashion, is going to want somebody to be tracking down
Sure.
the non-compliant when the 12-month period is about to end and, enforcing it. And so one of the things that's advantageous to us, if we can see, well, these are all taken care of, it shrinks the pool of the ones that might have to be tracked down. And I would suspect that they will ask department chairs and deans to have some role in that compliance and re-education, if that's a permissible word of the faculty. But that in the end, the responsibility does fall on the university and therefore on the Vice President of Research. The consequences fall on the university, not just on the individual PI. I don't know if that
Yeah.
kind of helps.
Michael, what
I
about
don't
for
know
you?
how it's working at Denver.
Yeah, it's smaller, obviously, but it's the same. So it's the Office of Research, the Associate Provost for Research, and it's the library, and it's a lot of conversation back and forth, and it's, for us, it's often sort of after the fact, right? We don't have a process in place, and I think it's more trying to figure it out as we're dealing with particular issues, right? It's not, there is no process, and there needs to be a process. The process needs to be somehow between the library and the Office of Research, and faculty aren't doing what they need. The researchers are not doing this without some prodding, I guess.
Okay, any other questions? Well, I want to thank all our speakers and thank you all for attending. We'll give you back a half an hour and enjoy the rest of the show. Thanks.